Welcome back. I hope you had a good break and a good chance to chat with your neighbours and meet people you've not met before. I'm really pleased to introduce the next panel for this afternoon session, a panel called Artist Voices, Reflections on Equitable Working and Co-Creation from Creators. And we have a really global panel participating. I'm just going to introduce them very briefly, but I'll let John Opie, the Head of Artist Support at Acme, who will be chairing and moderating the rest of the session, give a bit of a more in-depth introduction. So I'd like to welcome Haffendi Anuar, an artist from Malaysia, Lisa Marie Harris, artist and publisher from Trinidad and Tobago, Shaymaa Shoukry, choreographer from Egypt, and Varbeni Elikem Fiachi, also known as crazinisT artist, the artistic director and curator of perfocraZe International Artist Residency in Ghana. To the stage, please. And please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this panel on reflections from artists on how residencies can promote equitable working and include residents in their design and delivery. My name's John Opie, and I'm the new Head of Artist Support at Acme. I'll be looking after all aspects of Artist Liaison, and from next year, its awards and residencies programs. So this conversation is particularly of interest to me. I'm joined by a fantastic panel of 4 artists today who will introduce themselves in a moment. Haffendi, Lisa Marie, Shaymaa, and Varbeni. They will each have a presentation of around 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a question and answer led conversation. First, I wanted to say that the premise of this conversation is that residencies can be transformative for artists for their development of their practices, careers, and making new work. It can increase their networks and help them to make lasting international connections. I think we all believe in this ideal and want artists to flourish through the opportunities that we create. However, I think as we've all been discussing over the last couple of days, there are really tricky questions on which artists get to access these residencies based on their backgrounds and personal and financial situations, who is excluded from taking up opportunities to travel and spend time in different places. What can residency providers do to reduce barriers that may prevent someone from taking up a residence? What might an artist need during a residency in order to make the most of the opportunity? And above all, how can artists be involved in the design, delivery, and feedback on a residency that so it meets their needs, their creative and personal needs? Some questions to bear in mind whilst we listen to the presentations. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Haffendi to speak first.
Hello. Hi, I'm a visual artist working in object-based practice. I'm originally from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm now based in London and had recently started the live work 2-year residency at Acme Fire Station in London. I will be there till summer 2025. My current work looks at the kain pelikat, a type of colorful plain tubular transnational garment usually worn by men and are worn domestically and sometimes as an informal labor uniform in parts of the global south. Oriented in relation to my childhood memories of encountering and being enveloped by the fabric, my research and exploration of the iconography of the garment encompass personal family photos, archival photographs, images from social media, the internet, as well as images from books, and documenting the landscapes of colonized Malaya, pre-independence Malaysia. From the materials gathered, I would reimagine the fabrics and materials as constructions, such as hammocks, cradles, architectural structures, flags, and working in a process that incorporates collage, layering, mixed media painting, and sewing. I also create watercolor paintings that serve as sketches for my sculptural works. That's an image of a recent exhibition in Singapore. So I finished the last part of the final works at the fire station. So it was a good sort of, it was an apt period where I needed the space and for the final push. So I'm interested in sort of materials and visual patterns and take inspiration from architecture, Islamic design, traditional crafts of Southeast Asia, and archival images in ethnographic museums. Working sculpturally, I'm interested in presenting within the gallery format as well as outside of it in public spaces and working with different communities. In a way to sustain my practice, I also run a non-profit art gallery in Southeast London called the Gerald Moore Gallery, and it's part of a private school. And it focuses on learning and supporting emerging artists, curators, and writers. So this is another solo exhibition in London, I think a couple of years ago. I'm sorry. So I'm going to share a few sort of residency experiences I've had over the years. And I've always found residency to be a productive sort of period that I could focus all my energy. The first one was at Rimbundahan in Malaysia in 2015. It was a very short residency, so it's about a month, and it was sort of in between, sort of sandwiched in between my time working at a gallery. So I've always sort of worked in galleries or sort of non-profit spaces to sort of sustain my practice, and I had the opportunity to do this residency for a month. And I returned to Rimbundahan in 2017 to do a collaborative residency with Veronica Newkirch, and it was sponsored by Goethe Institute Malaysia. It was a longer time period, so about 3 months, and we were able to sort of balance working individually on our own practices, but also working collaboratively on an exhibition and also a publication. Veronica is originally from London and Germany, and she was in Malaysia for about 2 years at that time. So we were working sort of in studios next to each other, and there was a sort of no walls in between, so we could sort of work together on some projects. So this is an exhibition at the gallery at Rimbundahan. Nature was a big part of Rimbun, and I think Rimbundahan is also part of Artis Res. It's situated outside of Kuala Lumpur in this very beautiful sort of compound, which is also the home of the renowned architect Hijaz Kasturi. Veronica's work was inspired by the fauna of the area, so by like snakes, the skin of snakes and insects, while I was interested in the sort of modernist architecture of Hijaz Kasturi. So he designed the buildings in the space. This was a book launch, a book that we did together to sort of document the residency experience, what we've produced, and it's sort of in a format of a conversation, so it's just sort of a dialogue between Veronica and I. It was also sponsored by the Goethe Institute Malaysia, and you know, it was a great sort of document to put together the intense period of sort of exchange and making, and you know, we still sort of look at it as quite a fond memory and time together spent. So the format of the residency was quite open-ended. We didn't have to do a publication or an exhibition, but we thought that it's nice to have a sort of somewhat of a structure and to sort of place us in a space where we should collaborate and in a way produce something. This was my studio at Acme at Warden House in London, and it was part of the Khazanah Residency. I did my undergrad in London, and I went back to Malaysia, and it was my first time back for a slightly longer period in London, and it was a productive time, you know, being in London, seeing museums and galleries, meeting artists, and also taking up workshops at different sort of providers in London. I did a Jasmonite casting workshop at the London Sculpture Workshop, which was a good opportunity for me to learn about a new material, which culminated into a body of work that I exhibited post-residency. The last slide is a presentation of a group of us at Kush Artist Residency in Tehran. It was under the KARA, so Kush Artist Residency Award, which was awarded to me in 2019, along with 3 other artists. It was a 1-month residency in Tehran, and it was actually my first time in the Middle East, and to me, it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in terms of being in a place which is different from where I come from, and it was also at a time when it was quite politically charged. You can sort of feel it in the air. When I was there, I was interested in the architecture of the city. And I was especially interested in sort of the designs of gates and back doors. I did a lot of sketches and took photographs of them. And that's it, I think. That's for me.
Hi, everyone. Lisa Marie Harris. I'm a London-based artist, originally from Trinidad and Tobago. My practice is largely sculpturally directed, but also very multimedia. I work across wall reliefs, freestanding sculptures, artists, films, and shorts, also publishing and performance. Largely, my practice is related to personal histories, and especially dealing with dehumanization and objectification, and I'm dealing with those questions by asking questions about motherhood and women's bodies, and looking at how these bodies are positioned as things. And through that type of questioning, I also tease apart issues related to motherhood, migration, cultural stories related to my particular culture, Trinbagonian culture, and ecology. And largely, I find myself able to interpose more international issues, stories, and arcs within these very personal themes in my work. Thinking about motherhood and the body in particular, I have recently, oh, yeah, there we go. I currently have a show on at the Lightbox Gallery and Museum in Woking called The Pusher and the Pull, where I deal with these themes more directly. And I specifically use reclaimed objects from my children's lives and from my care role as I deal with issues about women's labor and mothering labor and the sort of scaffolding that that defines motherhood and defines the way that bodies are used within motherhood. Thinking also about the work I do in a larger sort of multimedia context, I have to support myself as an artist, as a publisher, and it's somewhat convenient that my background before being able to just exclusively work as an artist was in media. I had a background as a TV and radio producer and host, so I work with other artists who want to find ways to broaden their practice and explore their themes in unconventional and non-institutional ways, largely by making artist books and artist films in collaboration with other artists. I should mention that this was for a show I had recently at Cook Latham Gallery during London Gallery Week, responses to things I've been told about my body. Again, relating to personal histories and largely things told to women about bodies as objects of pleasure, objects of performance. And I developed that across a series of sculptures and also these artist books that I had as a limited edition that I made alongside other collaborators, where I incorporate my materials that some of them come from Trinidad, where I harvest and incorporate a gourd called the calabash into my work. It's a specific type of tree and object that is basically disliked for its smell, its look, and its size, but used because of its nourishment. So it's just used for what it can do for the rest of the plants and whatnot. And I use the gourd from that object within my sculpture and within my wall reliefs, sort of as an emblematic object of women's bodies being discarded, used, and reused. I also incorporate used skins and archival leathers that I gather from my own personal objects and my own materials to make the reliefs that you see in these images, and reliefs like these, which were shown in a group show, Raw Nerves, at Hannah Barry Gallery, I believe in 2022. Yeah. So this was from my residency at Acme, at Wharton House, as a result of being awarded the Helen Scott Lidgett Award. And it was a really good residency, because getting to a stage where one can have space to just work and to tease apart ideas and to sort of synthesize what you're trying to do as an artist is rare. And to have that space be supported and your practice be explicitly supported as well is very rare. But at the same time, it upended all of the assumptions I had about what working outside of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean would be like, because many other artists like myself who work within the international space, we all know that you're not getting opportunities internationally to work if you can't fund yourself, if you cannot fund your visa, if you even don't know how to approach different immigration bodies to get paperwork done, if you don't have money when you get over to another country, and these things are barriers that simply just exclude you from any international conversation about residencies and having that privilege of being able to do that kind of work. And for me, I've had to make my own residencies for most of my career so far. I've had to reach out to organizations in Trinidad like the Louis Kime Sculpture Museum, which is in Tobago, the sister isle of Trinidad. And they were gracious to just let me use Louise Kime's space. She's a late artist who passed away. She was of German origin, but moved to Trinidad and Tobago to develop sculptures with native logs and timber. But because I had to make the whole scaffolding up for myself, what I spent my time doing was actually making the scaffolding, because there was no one there to actually give support, give feedback, to interface with, to fund anything. All I had was the space. And that kept on happening with every subsequent residency type opportunity I try to make for myself, also with Callaloo Company in Trinidad, which is led by Peter Minshall, a kinetic artist who largely does carnival installations and large-scale kinetic sculptures. Again, I had to make it up as I go along. So when I came to London and finally had this opportunity to do an international residency that was actually really well supported, and there was a lot of interfacing between Acme, myself, Helen Scott Lidget Award, CSM, Central St. Martin's, who also facilitated the residency. A lot of it was still left up to me to figure out how to actually make work. So a lot of the concerns I have here with artists and being within a residency is not just getting there, but then when you get there, how do you purposefully use the resources around you to make work? And when you can't access those resources on your own, who is stepping in to guide, to support, and to help you strategize so that the time isn't just spent running around trying to put it all together, but you can actually use the time to build, to question, to turn your practice inside out and to make. So a lot of the making I did in this residency was so off the cuff, which ends up being useful. It ends up being a skill that you develop, but it does take away from the experience of developing your research, of asking deeper questions, because I was busy finding welders, for instance, for the sculptures I make, as opposed to simply making the work. And that in and of itself was a luxury, but then it begs the question, if the way residencies are structured right now, with that luxury of making work, if that is even useful for artists in the first place. And I think that is my last slide. Thank you.
All right, hello. I'm very happy to be here, so thank you very much for having me, Acme and Res Arts. Very grateful for the invitation and the past 2 days. So my name is Shaymaa Shoukry, and I'm a she, her. I'm from Cairo, Egypt, North Africa, the Middle East, by the Mediterranean Sea and the Nile. And we're very lucky to live so near to possible access to water and nature. We have the pyramids, inflation, currency devaluation, and all kinds of pollution, overpopulation, and lots of solidarity mixed with high levels of intrusion and collective anxiety. I am a mother of a 10-year-old boy, and I've been dancing since I was 8. I'm a choreographer since 2008, and I have an MA in visual arts and theater, and many unacademic dance training that should pile up for some kind of master's degree, but it really doesn't. I'm a martial artist and a traditional Chinese medicine energetician and an aspiring musician who refuses to learn the classical way and take many years of unlearning like I did with the classical ballet. So I'm trying to find out my way with live looping, the electric cello, and having some fun pedals and shy vocals. So for those who are visually impaired, I'm wearing a black dress and I have light brown hair. My skin is tanned and I am considered tall in most places. So I'm a part of a small community of independent artists in Egypt. We are self-organized, self-funded, and we share resources, co-create, collaborate in each other's projects, wear different hats. We are part of a scene that has very limited to no resources, no government funding, censorship, disarming, excluding government-run artists' unions that are hard to get into and limiting. I consider myself very lucky that I'm able to do what I love, and I have been privileged enough to always find means to do it. I have survived lack, limit, social judgment, and turned it into appreciation and encouragement. So like a little side example, my grandmother hated that I'm a dancer, and years later she had posters of me on her wall, so I consider this as some kind of a transformation. I have lived through a revolution and recovered from a broken back, a pandemic, led creative processes from a wheelchair, which was very humbling, gave birth, and yet the toughest one is being a single mom, which takes me into sharing my gratitude for being so generously hosted in so many national, regional, and international residencies, festivals, and gatherings. It is always a way to thrive on a personal and artistic level, and it takes a lot of juggling, self-doubt, feeling like an imposter, feeling unprofessional, worrying I'll be uninvited if I mention my child, and if I express needs or speak about them, asking for help so I can immerse in a creative process or prepare before I go on stage or land after being on stage or talk to a technician without my dress being pulled. So I remain super grateful as I compromise my resources, my energy, well-being, and time to rest, finances, and spending my own money to make work instead of making money producing my own work, in hope of sharing and continuing to share a creative process that is healing on a professional and a personal and a collective level, in hope of tipping the scales till it pays off, and it does pay off one way or another all of the time at some point in time. Simple things can be of great help. Information, for instance, can make my experience as a mother much smoother, like access to parents' network of the local neighborhood, or activities, or sports centers, or spaces, or play dates with the administrators of the residency organizers' kids, or childcare, or interns engaging sometimes with the children as part of the time. Contact with local schools who can, for a cool experience, allow a visiting student appropriate accommodation, and most importantly, following through when help is offered so that the situation doesn't suddenly change on the ground and the child or the parent are the one to compromise the well-being and still have to deliver the work. So gradually I've become less shy as my son grew, and it became easier for me to have him, and my insecurities around speaking my needs shrunk, and it took so much adapting to get there and lots of trial and error. In these 3 days, we have touched upon so many subjects, and I take it to heart and add my voice so dearly, loud and clear, and I feel that we are super aligned in intentions to better conditions and landscapes of which we work to be artists, hosts, network initiators. We have been super kind, containing, and listening, and we have a very open heart, and these days showed me so much promise and hope towards a future that gives a space to art in all its forms and formats. And I carry inspiration with concepts and words like collective justice, aiming for non-hostile spaces, and highlighting the importance and the ability to move freely in space for everyone. Remembering that areas outside the Europe are not poor and their resources are depleted from different forms of corruption and different levels of occupation, and looking at equity and distribution of resources as a social responsibility rather than an act of charity. Noticing how we adapt to communicate and how this is a mutual effort to fulfill each other's needs. It's very comforting to talk about care, rest, allowing, encouraging artists to also take time off in residencies. What does it mean to reside somewhere, in someone, in an idea, be present in a space, allow it to impact the creation, like forces mixing, life forces mixing, and a drive, meeting, magic, and alignment to co-create, to be able to work, to take time, space, solitude, or a chosen theme. Collective daydreaming, the future of these dreams and how they can carry on to be manifested, shared on, beyond. And how can hosts contribute in that through simple connections? The absolute truth of something is seeing it in all angles at all points in time and space. And it's not attainable for us in this dimension. So how can we deal with our limitations, and how do we challenge them, and how do we stay centered, honest, and enjoy? Yeah, with that said, I will share some pictures. So this is the shortest residency I've been on. It's 3 days long, and we were asked to create a performance. It was in Berlin, and we're a group of artists that were selected through the creative forum of the theater Festspiele in Berlin. And this is a residency that is on-site creation in beach of Alexandria, Cairo, no, not Cairo, Egypt. And this is me playing the cello at a performance that was titled the International Conference of Insecurity. And I thought maybe it's fun to bring here. And this is a self-organized residency that I initiated. It's called Between Land and Sea. And I invited somatic body worker Benoit Lachambre to come and do body work, and organized with a local who is Swiss, but she's locally based in the Red Sea, marine biologist, to study the movement of dolphins and how can we bring that experience back in the studio. And it was a collective healing process, I would say. And on the last day, we were asked all to share how was our experience. And my son was there, and he said that it's normal. And everybody said, yes, it should be normal to swim with dolphins and dance. So this was one experience. This is something I do twice a year with my martial arts master in school. We go to the mountains and train, and it's not a residency, but it's an act of solitude from the busy city. And this is in Amsterdam, and it was sharing the process of a piece titled Womb into a collective that was very open and participating upon their needs. And we had a showing at the end at a public square, and it was based on releasing the pelvis and the voice and being together. And this is at the Kampnagel in Hamburg, and the artist in the middle, Hannah, had a baby, but he's not in this picture. It was 3 mothers and their 3 kids, and for the first time they had us there, and we had to find a way, and between childcare and studio time, and my kid flew alone for the first time to join me at some point, and it was one of the first time I took him on, but without another adult with me helping, so it's a special moment. And also for the Kampnagel, I think it was their first time to deal with such a situation, so I hope we left something behind that could help other mothers. I think next would play a video. Yes. Or not.
عرض الرحم هو بيتكلم على المركز بتاع الجسم وعلى المكان اللي احنا كلنا جينا منه اللي هو الرحم. For the hosts, dancing is the origin of life force, creative energy. Women gathered and practiced more than 5,000 years ago without shame around their bodies and womanhood. Qigong, based on the jade egg practice, as a tool to heal, connect, and strengthen.
So this is my latest work in collaboration with musician Ahmed Saleh, and I have been working on writing applications for this piece for 3 years before it started to happen, which takes me to this idea that is related to the urgency of creation versus the time it takes to manifest a project, and if that urgency stays or not. And in that case, it did stay, and I think it paid off in a way that it's been brewing inside me for long. So in our first residency in Greece, we produced so much. We had 1 week and we already moved very fast in the creation. And then I had been lucky to have the studio residency from Pro Helvetia, which I also took my son on, and after paying all his expenses and taking him on, they offered to give me parental compensation, which was the first time this happened, but I had to do it first. Somehow it was not communicated beforehand. But in any case, it was a very beautiful container to be in Vevey by the lake and the mountains and the calm that is a very big paradox from where I'm staying most of the time, and make this piece. And the last thing I'm gonna share is fighting, and it's a residency that was in the 104 in Paris and resulted in this duo, also with the same musician, and it's a piece that I worked on before the pandemic and then toured a bit after, and still touring sometimes. Yeah.
خناقة اللي بنتخانقها طول الوقت، سواء مع نفسنا أو مع غيرنا أو مع المجتمع. فكرة الخناق اللي موجودة طول الوقت ongoing اللي ما بيننا وما بين العالم، وإزاي إحنا كبني آدمين بنلوب في ده، وإزاي بنأدابت لده، وإزاي بنصحى من جوه بحيث إن إحنا نعرف نكمل، أو إيه اللي بيحصل لما بنوقف.
Thank you very much. My name is Vabene Elikem Fiachi, also known as crazinisT. When I was invited to talk about or to be on this panel, I got a bit confused, very indecisive what exactly I want to talk about. Because I work as an artist, activist, and also I work as a founder and a director of a residency. The question is, what do I want to talk about? And I have to decide to talk about a residency. Also forgetting that the residency is an extension of my artistic practice and my activism as a radical empathetic solidarity for the community in which I live in Ghana. But briefly, I was born 1981. I grew as a Christian throughout my entire life. I became a teacher and I became a pastor, and I was preaching in several churches in Ghana until the age of 33, which I died and was born again to be who I am today. So unlearning the entire 33 years became a challenge for me. And by 2018, 2016, I would say I've been practicing as an artist since 2011, but 2016 was my first artistic salary that I've ever received in Switzerland when I was invited for Bern Festival. And that gave me a new challenge. And I decided to launch this residency because prior to that, I was nearly attacked and lynched in 2013, alleged as a homosexual or just being queer. And then I think that we needed a space to have very uncomfortable conversations and be able to speak out. And so when I got back from Switzerland in 2016, I could only rent 2 rooms in this house. Because of course, how much was I paid? So I could only rent 2 single rooms, but what happened? Okay, we keep waiting. So, but I just, even renting these rooms, I believe and hope that someday I'll be able to, we may need a technical assistant. Okay, he's back to life. Yeah, I believe that I would be able to create a space that we can regenerate, that we can recharge, and we can talk about our situations. 2017 became one of the most difficult years because I had to travel a lot. And my first artistic residency was Villa Wolbeta in Munich. And all the monies I was raising since that time is what I invest into the renovations that you see going on in the video. And I keep creating this space like nonstop. Every single money I receive, I just pump into this. Of course, I stopped staying in Ghana for long because I have to work to get the money, realizing that if I don't go to Europe, I don't get this money. So I was traveling in between Ghana and Europe all the time. And 2018, when I left London and was in Cape Verde, I was detained for three days in Cape Verde because I'm a trans person. And it was very challenging that even the Prime Minister of Cape Verde and the National Military Commander had to come in and sign a kind of letter and give me an escort to the airport before I could leave Cape Verde. And even after that, that letter was violated and I was stripped naked in the airport, which was traumatizing. But I mentioned this because I was dealing with that whilst creating the space. I was dealing with this issue and I could not even speak about it because I was focusing on this space. So when I got back to Ghana, I was just working and working and working. And then finally, the residency was launched in September 2018, and we had, I don't really know what is happening. I'm sure it's the internet or I don't know. And we had our first artist residency in 2019, hosting more than 35 artists from across the world. And that I believe since then that I could do this with the limited resources that I have. I will need to jump to somewhere. The video is not so, there's something happening to the video. The video is 3-minute video, but unfortunately it didn't end. But you can find it on YouTube. And so the residency started functioning from 2019. And then we had 2020 until March, COVID came and everything was shut down. But Ghana couldn't lock for long. So we were operating even though internationals could not come. And as you can see on the screen is the residency. I given a speech, and down there is my own performance. So since I'm not talking about my performance, at least you can see one image of my performance there, which is the one down there. And if you go to my website, you'll see a lot of them. If you Google crazinisT artists or YouTube, you will see the videos. So every month we receive a maximum of 8 artists in residency, and they stay depending on how many months they apply for. So the minimum is 1 month and maximum of 3 months, at least to be able to make space for other people to have the experience. The residency is also not focusing on production, so you are not given any huge expectation to end with any product. Our hope is that the experience in this residency and the connection with the locals and other people that you'll meet in the residency would become a kind of a rebirth for new possibilities in your practice. So whether you are a mid-career, you are an established artist, or you are emerging, or you are just interested in becoming an artist. So that also would come back to questions on how we select our applicants. Yeah, so this is how we actually eat in the residence. So it's a kind of communal space where both the locals and we, the residents of the house, permanent members of the house, live with international artists in residence, sharing every single thing except the single bed you sleep on, unless you invite us into your bed. So from bathhouse to bedrooms, so we have 6 bedrooms, and there are 4 beds in some of them. Depending on the size of the rooms, there are 2 beds in some of them. So you can imagine that you are coming to a residency 4 weeks or 2 months, you are going to live with somebody you don't know from anywhere. And this temporal experience is to also help people to move out of their own comforts and their own bubbles and begin to experience something that is different. And we eat every day together, especially our dinner is always together. So this is one of the artists from Cameroon. The challenge of this residency from 2019, I realized, is that it became a very structural, discriminatory residency against locals or African artists. Why do I say that? I have created an international artist residency, hoping that I really want to create a community where we can all meet and talk. But then local artists cannot participate, especially from other regions of Africa, because traveling across borders in Africa is not easy. I can move freely within Europe than moving within Africa. So this artist with the metal cage on the head was coming from Cameroon. And I was so interested in the works I see online. So I had to pay for her flight from my own artistic salary, 800 USD as at that time, 2019, before COVID. At that time, I could fly to Germany for 600 and 700 USD. So you can just have that imagination. So it's one of the huge challenge. We begin to realize how the structure and the system and the challenge we face become also like a discriminatory situation for us to have exchange on the continent with artists in our residency. So there are workshops happening. Artists are encouraged to meet with the local, create their own workshops. And we need to understand also the expectation of artists, especially people who have never been to any other part of the world before. And they can go to maybe Acme Residency, and maybe they have a whole flat to themselves. And then there are technical assistance and everything. We try to provide assistance, but we are not that efficient because we need fundings to do those things. And most of the people who support are my own mentees who are volunteers and people that I'm training and guiding through artistic processes. Some of them also who are students. And because of their economic situation, I became like a mother to them and taking care of them in schools. So in exchange, they are also supporting artists by giving them assistance. And we also encourage a lot of public work because, again, I'm not talking about my work, but most of my own practice and performances happen in public spaces. Guerrilla performances a lot, very invasive, very confrontational, and very provocative. So I had to guide also artists through that process of using public space. In that sense, I also have to become a kind of mother, which I know that mothering can be interpreted in different senses and different contexts. But the reason I normally use this is that because I put my life there at risk on purpose. I know what I want to achieve. I know why I'm doing it, and I'm willing to die for this. But then I would not actually encourage an artist to go and die on the street when the artist does not really understand even the process, the space. So it should be the artist's own agency to take certain risk. So I need to explain that even I work in public space, I work in this, I have to take the artist through all this process to understand that for me, if I die in my performance, the work is done. Is that why you want to do it? Are you there for that, or just because Wabene can do it on the street? So it's a very complicated space because in Ghana, you may never know how vulnerable you are until you become a victim. Everybody is so nice. Everybody is so kind. But just one single thing can change the whole conversation around you. If somebody screams at you on the street, gay, lesbian, or a trans person, you could be lynched in the next 5 seconds. You are dead. But the same people can be so kind and hospitable. So you cannot predict anything. So using public space became very challenging, encouraging artists to use. But of course, if artists are just doing experimental performances, they are doing performances that are not actually addressing the situation of queerness in Ghana, then this actually is safe. So these are some of the things. So you can see some of public performances, which are very communal, they are very playful, ritualistic. These performances are not at the same risk as if you are trans queer person and advocating for trans or queer rights in performance. So as part of my curatorial work also, the young people that I mentor, once a while I organize a group exhibition for them, and we try to use alternative spaces, abandoned parks, abandoned houses, abandoned buildings, because we cannot rent like very conventional spaces for those works. But it makes the works, most of the works come out much more interesting. So this was one of the exhibitions called Reincarnate Talks, which was created 2020 during the COVID. And it is also a way to bridge the gap between the queer community and the ordinary Ghanaian family, where people can have a kind of interaction with people and begin to see the human in us than the image that is created in their imagination. So it's a way of trying to create a relationship so that we do not create a very queer exclusive space and losing our own families. My mom is not queer, my dad is not queer. Becoming trans person or identifying and accepting my trans identity does not necessarily need to cut me away from my parents. So like, how do we make parents understand this process of supporting their queer children and queer sisters, queer siblings, and this way we extend most of our work to public spaces. 2019 was also one of the biggest public park performance by an artist from Uruguay, who was in residence for one month and built a sculptural work that was flamed on the last day of the performance. The performance attracted a lot of people from the community to experience it, and that also became another network to some other artists who were in residency, to the people who came to this performance. Like I said, we have artists who are coming from like Switzerland, Sweden, Germany, some of whom can also access fundings and come. So this artist was in Ghana for like 2 times already. And this year, she was also there as one of my mentees again, because I run also an international mentorship program, which she applied for, and it's 12 months program she applied for, and the exhibition was a month ago. It closed in August. And they were funded by Pro Helvetia for this project. So this also is building a kind of relationship between the institution and other funding institutions. Unfortunately, the funding institutions are not funding the residency. They fund artists to the residency. And again, we wish that those fundings could be extended to the residency, so we can also be able to help the locals to be part of all these conversations that are happening, the programs that are going on. Yeah. So these are just some other images from the residency. And 2020, when we were scared of COVID, or when COVID actually shut down, we opened Go Digital, PR Go Digital. And we were hosting more than 30 to 40 artists online. So we started doing an online program. And again, that became another form of alienation or discrimination, because there were a lot of locals who could not participate in this program, because to even access internet from some rural spaces was challenging. Secondly, the internet is not free, and you have to buy data and stuff. So we could only afford to support few people to be part of this from Ghana and from outside of Ghana. I mean, from Ghana and other African countries, not more than we could do. So yeah, so this is the last slide, which is, you can scan the code, which is after 2021, there's a new bill in Parliament which seek to criminalize landlords for renting house to queer persons, whether it's a queer organization or not. Once you identify as queer, your landlord goes to jail for not less than 5 years and not more than 10 years. And so PR, the residency, actually become one of the targets among other organizations in Ghana, because we are renting this place. And we fear for how many people who are living with me where they will move to if this bill is passed. So we started running GoFundMe, and we have been applying to a lot of international funds. We have never received a single one yet. And we needed to move and have our own accommodation, because I can no longer handle the fear of my landlord, in addition to what I'm already dealing with. Because he is also afraid. Of course, he's a very kind person who is helping us to even find a house to buy, but it's about the money to buy the house. It's not about finding a house to buy. So this is our GoFundMe page, and this page also may give you a lot of details to what is happening in Ghana. So you can scan the code. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for some amazing presentations there. Reminder of how complex and personal residencies are, but also how important work is and how high the stakes can be at times. We've got about half an hour for question and answers right now. I've got some in case hands don't go up, but I was wondering if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask the panel. The stage lights are quite bright as well. Could they be turned down slightly so we can see everyone? Any questions? If not, I'm going to ask, to the theme of co-creation and thinking about the hypothetical situation that you have got your residency already, what kind of conversations would you like with the residency provider beforehand to know that the residency is being created in a way that is going to be safe, will make you happy, will be productive, has the right kind of environment for you to feel confident and comfortable in it, what kind of conversations would you want before you step on the plane to arrive there? Would anyone like to take that first?
Is this one? Yeah. I think in the panel before the break, a point came up about transparency, and I'd like to add to that flexibility. I think from the artist side, when you're talking with the provider, the residency provider, there's always this sort of opacity that you don't get full information, and the ones that work are the ones where the transparency, just being able to tell artists exactly what you can provide and what you cannot, where you can stretch and where you need to have like health and safety and different legalities involved, helps immensely. But then also leaving enough room for flexibility so that if things don't work out, there's a contingency or an openness. You know, that's what worked for me, at least in my residency with Acme. Some of the things that we expected just did not happen the way they were supposed to. But then came the flexibility where I could come up with other ideas. For instance, I ended up using a lot of my space and time in my residency as a film, I call it a film lime, basically a film screening, and other artists who wanted to share new films they were working on and sort of have very informal feedback were able to, on I think about 2 or 3 different occasions, just come to the studio very informally, and we used space to screen films, play it online, and it ended up being very supportive, very practice building, but also a good use of the time. So you didn't feel like I didn't get what I was supposed to get, so it didn't work out. And the provider, well, in this case, Acme, ended up being very open to this idea that was very left of field. It wasn't at all what I came to do. But they were like, yeah, just if that's what you want to do it, you know. And I've had other colleagues say, well, if they could have that too in their residency, that sort of responsiveness. Things didn't work out, but you could still do this, and let's just see where it goes, you know. So the flexibility and the transparency, I think, is what would make everybody's lives very simple.
Thank you. Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, throughout this whole, at least a three days program that I have been part of, there are 4 key things that I've taken from that when it comes to relationship between the artist and the what we are now calling the provider. The first thing on my list is transparency, followed by communication, funding, and care. Because it also depends on where the residency is situated in this part of the world and who is coming also into the residency. When we talk about transparency, you know, it's not all about saying that we cannot provide this or we provide this. It's that invites a whole communication. Someone was asking me, how do I do that in one of the workshops? When we select our artists, like right now we've selected all the artists. This week we are emailing. Part of the email is that after you confirm your participation, we are going to have a Zoom call. And in this Zoom call, there'll be other alumni, which we call our residency aluminox, because we try to degender everything. We are trying. All other aluminox in this Zoom call who would share their experience, whether it is negative or positive, we don't care. We want them to be as open as they can so that people can learn from that and know where they are going to. And then the Zoom call is not for us to speak, it's for us to listen. So we invite the people who apply to ask as much as questions they have to ask, and then we try to respond. Part of it, we take people, it's unfortunate that the video I tried to play wasn't playing. Part of it is that we take the on the Zoom, we take people through the house to see even the bedroom, to see the kitchen, to see the compound, to see everything. At least, even though it's virtual, you have an imagination about this space. That when you come, you realize that you are not in Atelier Mondial, and you are not in ZKU, you are not in Acme. And so you don't have the luxury as I would have in some spaces in Europe. So this is for us to get a bit closer to that. Of course, all this is spelled on our application form, and that makes our application become like a thesis. So you have to read a whole, because over the years we have come to understand that we have blind spots, and this makes it very difficult for us when people arrive and they have their own expectations and we don't know how to deal with it. So it is not like there's a single answer to it, but it depends on where and who is coming.
Thank you. It feels really important to be that aligned in terms of expectations, but also the environment that you're coming into when you first arrive, so you minimise the shocks on arrival. Do we have any questions anywhere? Yes, on my right-hand side there.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentations. I really enjoyed them, and thank you to all four of you for the work that you do. A couple of you at least mentioned issues around safety and around treatment because of your identities. And as someone who has been physically and online stalked by fascists and the far right because of my activism and because of my work in the arts, I wondered if you felt that you're properly protected from any of those kind of issues in the residencies you're in. And for those of you involved in organising them, how do you protect against that in relation to those who might be coming into the space and giving a fake identity, with a purpose, because that's what far-right groups do. Sometimes they try and infiltrate spaces and pretend they're somebody they're not. And probably not really a question for the four of you, but for providers. What do you do? I mean, we've spoken quite a lot over the last few days about safety and safe spaces, etc. What do you do to ensure that you don't have the far right infiltrating, you don't have people who are homophobic, transphobic, racist, etc., getting into your spaces? And do you have, like, I'd be interested to know if providers have policies which have a complete zero tolerance. So in the trade union movement, we have rules in our unions that means that you will be expelled immediately if you're found to be active in a far-right group. But then I guess also, I think what you've presented shows some self-care in the arts and the spaces that you're creating and working in. What do you do to ensure that you have some individual self-care given the things that you're having to navigate just to be able to do your arts? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can speak to this. So I have a system, in a sense, is that as an action of artistic integrity, I would say, is that I hold my creative expression in a way that I would not change what I would do according to the context I'm in. So what I would be able to defend in my city is what I would share in Bern, and I wouldn't use the opportunity of being in a different space to change that narrative. That's one thing. My system has enforced a certain kind of self-censorship that is very embedded and is very, I don't know how to label it patronizing or liberating, because in a sense, you understand, as you said, what the rules are and how to bend them, break them, push them, and when are you taking them too far, and when are you aware of the risk, and how do you want to deal with that risk? So it's a complete dialogue between awareness, artistic integrity, and honesty. And I have a feeling that, for example, with my solo or co-creation with Ahmed Woomb, a lot of what I say can be provocative and can be very, shaking, moving. And I had a mother from my son's school, because I usually make it a point to invite other parents to come see the work I'm doing to create a network of embracing independent art and independent artists into different contexts. But she's French, and she told me that she was scared for my safety on stage in Cairo doing this piece, and I found it very reflective of her own fear, I would say, in a sense, rather than how I'm feeling. And in another context, I would choose not to share this piece, because I would understand that it will not be received in a way that would be of a positive, energetic interaction for me. So, and for example, another setting, I was in the International Conference of Insecurity Creation, and I had a speech. And after I've written the speech, I felt unsafe to say the speech. And instead, I performed saying the speech without saying the speech, talking about how I cannot say the speech I want to say. So you end up finding ways of knowing how to interact with your system, and again, seeing those limitations as a challenge to create from a space where you stay close to yourself and what you need to say and how to say it in a way that is also comprehensible to who you're talking to, because sometimes if you are too provocative in a sense, people will just close you off and it won't be a dialogue anymore. So, yeah.
I've also realized that I have to have very open conversations and establish boundaries from the onset with any residency provider. Any residency provider, any organization or gallerist, anyone I'm working with for safeguarding. When I think about the kind of work I do, where I'm addressing body politics, basically, and I'm making objects that seem very alluring. I'm using leathers, and they invite touch and talk about sensations, and people expect that you are inviting sexual conversations or very inappropriate relations, and they come to the work thinking this is where they can vent themselves or launch their own crazy, delusions upon you. So before I even start work, I find I have to break it down basically with whomever I'm working with and establish that these are the sort of protections I need. These are the topics I'm dealing with. Are you in support of that? Are you aware of all of the politics that surrounds this kind of work? And are you prepared to basically bat with me if some crazy loon comes talking about sexual advancements, either in a studio visit, for instance, or just in the gallery space or in a presentation space? And it becomes complicated when people consider, for instance, my ethnicity, or they consider that I'm foreign, and then there's this whole idea of exotic foreign person, sexual, and all of these strange things that cloud the work. So it starts with a conversation for me at the onset with residency providers and with anybody I have to work with. And if that conversation doesn't hit the right tone, I will have to sort of self-censor and realize I can't do this. I can't take this opportunity, because if anything were to happen, I will not be supported. what I'm bringing, the experience that I would bring to them would not even be taken seriously. So yeah, it starts with a really open, serious, drab conversation about boundaries and about establishing what kind of support I would need and what providers can give before the work even gets made or before any conversations take place.
Thank you for sharing. Also, I think for myself, it's kind of nuanced in my work, but you know, living as a sort of a gay artist who moved to the UK and coming in from quite a conservative country, and I think my experience was when I did the residency in Tehran. I think I was not. I'm aware of sort of the dangers of living as a gay person in Iran, but it was kind of not vocalized to me by the residency provider. So, and I think you know, because, you know, when you start a residency, you don't really know the people on the ground until you have started it. And I think I was more open about myself when I reached there, and then was brief of sort of how to behave and act. And it also felt quite alienating at times. I think because of that factor, you were sort of not also connected to the local queer community or the gay community, and I had to sort of reach out, you know, also in response, in sort of context of what I'm working on in my research, that I wanted to, you know, connect with sort of local, the local queer community, and I had to do it via sort of available apps, which is again quite a dangerous exercise because they could be undercover. I was told they could be undercover policemen. They could, you know, catch you when you're sort of meeting this person in the public. So I think it would be good for, I think, providers to sort of, you know, inform artists of, you know, of sort of part of the queer community in sort of these very, could be quite dangerous sort of environments if you are open.
Yeah, thank you. I'll speak from both sides, as an artist going to residence and as a so-called provider. One thing I want to say here is that I think we as a human society, we are building too much resistance to have conversation. People, we are so quick to be defensive that if you and I are speaking and you are white and I am black, as soon as I begin to point out racist things, you feel already attacked. And when you feel already attacked, there is no point and there is no room for reflection and conversation. And this is very difficult. And if I realize you're already feeling attacked, then I have to, if I don't want to push it, then I have to already be, I don't know the word you mean to use, you know, and that is the thing we need to really start working on as a human society. And it's the same way if I'm trans and because you are straight, the fact that you are straight doesn't mean you are homophobic. It's not a crime to be straight. It's not a crime to be straight. It's a crime to allow your straightness to become an abuse to me. But be straight, let me be this. And we walk along the same path and go. Okay, so if we are having this conversation and then you are feeling already being attacked because I'm a trans person and saying something about what I'm going through, we can have conversation. So in the residencies, we have to create room for this form of conversation. I really feel it's very unfortunate we didn't watch the end of the video there, because this is the point. When you don't have enough conversation, or you don't allow flexibility for conversations and the randomness of it, your understanding ends at where you have heard things up to. Right now, if they ask you about my residency, all that you know, you saw somebody scrubbing the wall, and then there is a very dirty house, there is something. You don't know the end of that story. And so when we go to residency and we are not given the chance to have conversations about whom we are, where we are coming from, it's very difficult for people even to know what kind of care we need. And the same way, as a host, if I don't give room for this conversation, I won't be able to know what is happening. We need to create a family in residency spaces. We don't need to create job and employment. We need to create family and see, like, I can talk to you, you can talk to me. But I understand also, because of the very bureaucratic structures that is employed into radical residency running, it has brought back the same problem that we want to solve. That my work ends at printing. So if you come to me about question on kitchen, I have no answer. So if there's no kitchen staff, I am unable to attend to you at this time. But if we all can begin to see ourselves as a family, and I know what happens in the kitchen, what happens in the toilet, what happens in the printing room, if one person is immediately indisposed, we can provide at least a temporal answer. And this comes to the safety situations. Because if my team don't know what is happening, and it's only me who can provide these answers, it's very risky. At the end of the video, which you can check on YouTube, now we are hosting over 350 people from the community and from other cities around here every January in the last weekend. Because we came to realize that activism cannot be, it has no singular answer or a singular strategy. So we have built something that we don't have to build bridges between us and the homophobes in the community. But not walls. We don't want to build walls, but let's build bridge between us. And so we call something Love Feast. And Love Feast is every January when we allow, and that's a very vulnerable position, we allow everybody, anyone, to sign up for free and come and eat and dance with us. 2020 was the first edition, and we have 150 people. As of 2023, we had more than 350 people. In this way, we started realizing how some of the communities begin to stand for us. Because they come to eat with us, they dance with us. For the first time, some of them have sat with a trans person in their life. Because we understand that the root of the problem is not from our family, our parents, or our friends in the society. It's from the top, coming from the top. And so if we can actually create room for the people on the ground to begin to understand a relationship and a connection, we can build a resistance from the parliament who is making the law, which is believing that majority of Ghanaians are against homosexuality, and make other people begin to find themselves into majority. So it's a different strategy to think about the vulnerability of people and to think about the safety of people. At the same time, who are the people that we can connect to, even though they are not from our community? And that is one of the strategies. So it also depends on where you find yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. Remarkably, we've almost run out of time, and I'm sorry we haven't taken more questions, but I think it's been important to let the conversation flow up here. Hopefully it will continue over lunchtime. So I'd like to ask you to thank our amazing panel here,